Session resumed. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, under the calendar of business for the day, I move to consider House Bill number 4058 and its general principles and provisions as contained in Committee Report number 7, submitted by the Committee on Appropriations. And for this purpose, may I request that the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the measure.
Any objection? Hearing none, the Secretary General is hereby directed to read the title of the measure as mentioned by the Majority Leader.
House Bill number 4058, an act appropriating funds for the operation of the government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2026.
Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to open the period of sponsorship and debate.
An objection? Hearing none, the period of sponsorship and debate insofar as Committee Report number 7 as contained in House Bill 4058 is hereby opened. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to recognize Representative Micaela Swansing, Chairperson of the Committee on Appropriations, to deliver the sponsorship speech on House Bill number 4058.
The Honorable Mika Swansing is hereby recognized for his sponsorship speech. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, distinguished colleagues, esteemed members of the Development Budget Coordination Committee, or the DBCC, fellow public servants, partners from civil society organizations, and to our to the Filipino public closely watching the deliberations today, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Every year, the Filipino people look to Congress not as a mere crafter of policies, but as an origin of hope. The student who needs a scholarship, the farmer who necessitates a farm-to-market road, the mother who seeks affordable health care, and the senior citizen who relies on their monthly pension for their daily survival. Each number, each line item approved under the General Appropriations Bill results in profound implications for those who hope. The constitutional and moral imperative of Congress is clear: to ensure that every centavo of the Filipino people's tax money is appropriated towards programs that amplify, not destroy, this hope. Today, we open the plenary deliberations for fiscal year 2026 General Appropriations Bill, the backbone of our fiscal policy and the clearest mirror of our government's priorities. The Constitution entrusts Congress with the power of the purse, a solemn responsibility that demands integrity and vigilance. The plenary deliberations of the General Appropriations Bill are among the greatest exercises of our democracy. The spirited debates that will result from these discussions should ensure that the General Appropriations Act will represent the priorities and necessities of every Filipino, from the islands of Batanes to the mountains of Compostela Valley. Our challenge is to ensure that every peso is grounded in science, feasibility, and genuine need. Bawat piso, dapat may pakinabang. Bawat proyekto, dapat may saysay. At bawat programa, dapat madamdaman ng bawat Pilipino. We deliberate today under a challenging fiscal landscape. Global uncertainty continues to weigh on our economy. Rising debt obligations, inflationary pressures, reducing both household and government purchasing power, and geopolitical disruptions in international markets. Despite these constraints, the DBCC has anchored the 2026 budget on a sound macroeconomic framework. Gross domestic product growth of 6 to 7%, inflation managed within 2 to 4%, fiscal deficit at 5.3% of GDP, and debt to GDP ratio at a sustainable 61.8% by end of 2026. total revenues are projected at 4.983 trillion pesos, or 16.2% of GDP, supported by stronger tax collection efforts, improved compliance to current debt obligations, and prudent borrowing strategies. This fiscal program assures us that even with limited fiscal space, there remains sufficient room to prioritize the needs of the Filipino people. The proposed fiscal year 2026 national budget amounts to 6.793 trillion pesos, equivalent to 22% of GDP. Sisiguraduhin po natin na ang budget na ito ay mararamdaman ng bawat Pilipino. Mas matatag at maluwag na mga classroom, mas kompletong kagamitan sa mga ospital, at pagkain sa mesa ng bawat Pilipino. Madam Speaker, I emphasize that this budget is centered on human capital development, as underscored by President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. in his 2025 State of the Nation address. In the National Expenditure Program, the President stressed that the 2026 budget must nurture a future-ready generation, one that is healthy, educated, resilient, and competitive. Each aspect of this General Appropriations Bill foremost acts towards capacitating and restoring the dignity of each Filipino by increasing positive outcomes in food security, climate resilience, and infrastructure modernization, while also demanding transparency and efficiency in public spending. This budget is also a testament to comprehensive reforms aimed at restoring public trust, the paramount imperative our Congress faces in the current moment. We have abolished and outdated the small committee that once shrouded these deliberations in secrecy and unilaterally placed the jurisdiction over the funds of 116 million Filipinos in the hands of a few. We will also open the bicameral conference committee sessions. All of these towards our firm commitment towards open, transparent, and participative budget deliberations. Tatanggalin po natin ang tabing sa usaping budget. Nais ko rin pong bigyang diin na nadidinig po natin ang panawagan ng ating mga kababayan na mas maging bukas ang proseso at magkaroon sila ng mas malakas na boses sa pagbuo ng budget. This year, we turned that call into action. Civil society organizations were present as we did the People's Budget Review. And they were also engaged and are also present during the committee hearings. They helped scrutinize the allocations of the people's money. Ito po ang people's budget in action. Ang bawat piso ay hindi lamang plinano ng ating gobyerno, kundi isinama din mismo natin ang tinig at pangangailangan ng ating mga kababayan. Transparency and accountability are not simply buzzwords. These are the foundation of our nation's social contract, the basis upon which the continuous renewal of trust in the mandate of our government rests. At the heart of the people-centered budgeting is the principle that public funds must directly serve the needs of our citizens. The Department of Public Works and Highways budget has been reduced from its original 881.3 billion peso budget, meaning infrastructure modernization allocation, down by 225 billion pesos to 625.7 billion pesos. After years of questionable bidding and substandard outcomes of flood control projects, I echo the President's declaration. Not a single peso will go to questionable flood control projects in the 2026 budget. That 255 billion pesos has been redirected to urgent needs: education, healthcare, agriculture, and food security, while also building a real climate resilience. Madam Speaker, the message of the Budget Amendments Review Subcommittee, or the BARC, is clear. The people come first. This year, we give our children our youth, the highest allocation for education in the nation's history. Education stands as the single largest priority in the fiscal year 2026 budget, with over 1.17 trillion pesos, or 17.22% of the national budget. The clearest sign that we are investing in the future of our children. Beyond the national expenditure program, we furthermore added 38.3 billion pesos out of the 255 billion pesos from DPWH. We have realigned that amount, affirming what we have always been saying about the 2026 budget. It will be an education budget. It will be a capital development centered budget. Under the basic education facilities, the BEF fund, we will be adding the 28.06 billion that was initially earmarked for classroom construction and repair in the NEP is further increased by 22.5 billion, bringing the total funding for basic education facilities program to 50.56 billion pesos. At an estimated cost of about 2.5 million pesos per classroom, this will translate to an additional 20,000 classrooms that will be built in 2026. Each of these classrooms represents fewer students packed into unsafe, overcrowded spaces, and more children learning in environments that uplift rather than discourage. Adding to this, the Commission on Higher Education gained 9.31 billion pesos from the initial funding in the NEP. We are expanding the tertiary education subsidy and Tulong Dunong program. Furthermore, the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, was allotted an additional 991 million pesos for training and scholarships. Meanwhile, the Philippine Science High School System secured 450 million pesos to nurture the country's next generation of scientists and innovators. With the addition of around 37 billion pesos towards the education budget, we are now at 4.1% of GDP, over the constitutional requirement of 4%. Next, healthcare follows as the second pillar of this realignment. With 409.8 billion pesos in the national budget in the NEP, we will be adding 89.3 billion pesos to that from the realignments from DPWH. The medical assistance to indigent and financially incapacitated patients, or MAIFIP, remains one of the top priorities, reflecting our determination to ease the burden of medical expenses for the poorest Filipino families, and in line with the directive of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to initiate zero balance billing in government hospitals for the most indigent patients. We augmented MAIFIP by 26.73 billion pesos, bringing the program's total amount to 51 billion pesos. Using an estimated cost of about 40,000 pesos per patient, this will benefit around 1.27 million indigent Filipinos worldwide. Moreover, 60 billion pesos in additional funds will be realigned towards PhilHealth to expand benefits under the universal healthcare, paving the way toward our aspiration of zero balance billing in public hospitals. We will be, in line with the direction of the President, we will be returning the 60 billion pesos to PhilHealth through the NEP. But we also would like to send the call to PhilHealth to please use the 60 billion pesos in additional funding towards increasing the benefit package for patients and towards paying their obligations towards hospitals. To PhilHealth, please use this additional allocation for the benefit of the Filipino people, not towards investments or income-generating initiatives. Agriculture remains a cornerstone of national survival and resilience. with 284.13 billion pesos in the national budget dedicated to ensuring food security and complemented by another 30 billion pesos for the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, or RCEF. To reinforce this amount, an additional 44.9 billion pesos will be realigned towards DA and NIA for rural and farmers development. Of this amount, 41 billion was directed toward farm-to-market roads, post-harvest facilities, crop insurance, irrigation, ports, and agricultural modernization. The Presidential Assistance to Farmers and Fisher Folk Program will also be allocated 7 billion pesos, which at 7,000 pesos per beneficiary will directly support 1 million farmers and fisher folk across the country. These allocations guarantee that our farmers, the backbone of our food security, receive the comprehensive support that they need to sustain livelihoods and keep food on every Filipino table. The National Irrigation Administration likewise will receive an additional 5 billion pesos to construct, restore, and repair irrigation systems vital to sustaining agricultural productivity. This year, we also expanded protection for the most vulnerable sectors through the Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situations, or AICS program, under the Department of Social Welfare and Development. In the National Expenditure Program, 27.04 billion was originally allotted for AICS. The BARC and the committee then realigned an additional 32 billion pesos towards AICS, bringing its total to 59.1 billion pesos. At an estimated assistance of around 10,000 pesos per beneficiary, this will reach nearly 5.9 million Filipinos in crisis. We also strengthened protection for displaced and disadvantaged workers through the Tulong Panghanap Buhay sa Ating Disadvantaged Displaced Workers Program, or TUPAD, under the Department of Labor and Employment. In the National Expenditure Program, 12.14 billion pesos was originally set aside for TUPAD. The BARC and the committee then realigned an additional 14.82 billion pesos towards TUPAD, bringing its total to 26.96 billion pesos. At an average assistance of 5,500 per worker, this budget will benefit nearly 4.9 million Filipinos nationwide. These are not mere figures. These are breadwinners who will be given temporary jobs to keep food on the table, and children in school, and families who can weather difficult times with dignity. The mentioned agencies, however, will still undergo rigorous scrutiny during the plenary deliberations to ensure that they have both the capacity and readiness to fully utilize the funds allocated to them, and that these resources truly reach the communities they are intended to serve. Every peso of the 255 billion pesos coming from DPWH realigned towards other agencies was reviewed line by line and reallocated in a way that is open, transparent, and participatory. Dear colleagues, we did not simply move the funds. We redirected them towards the daily needs of our people: classrooms for learners, medical assistance for patients, roads for farmers, jobs for workers, and crisis support for families. This is people-centered budgeting in its clearest form. It is proof that this Congress listens, responds, and acts to make every peso count where it matters most. As chairperson of the Committee on Appropriations, I emphasize every allocation must be rational, feasible, and guided by science. My dear colleagues, allow me to stress a truth we cannot ignore. The trust of our people in our congressional institutions is slowly being eroded. When citizens witness budgets that do not match their realities, when funds fail to reach those who need them most, confidence in government collapses. It is the biggest imperative of our time to restore this trust through foremost accountability. The all-encompassing reformation and transparency of our budget process is the first step towards this end. The alleged mismanagement of public funds through questionable flood control projects amid the increasing frequency and intensity of scorching heat waves and typhoons is of utmost concern to our people. Therefore, we have to make sure that the 2026 budget restores the Filipinos' faith in our institution. I must stress that this budget embodies our collective resolve to build a stronger and more hopeful future for every Filipino. This budget needs to hold a hope for a nation where no Filipino is left behind. Madam Speaker, I humbly sponsor the proposed General Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2026 and respectfully seek the support of my colleagues in the House for its timely and responsible passage. Together, let us ensure that this budget reflects the aspirations of our people and strengthens trust in our institutions. Sa bawat proyekto, ang mamamayan ang dapat nasa sentro. Sa bawat alokasyon, ang kapakanan ng taong bayan ang pangunahing batayan. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang Kongreso, mabuhay ang sambayan ng Pilipino para sa Diyos at bayan.
Maraming salamat, Chair, Congressperson Swansing. Majority Leader, please.
Mr. Speaker, I move to proceed with the interpellation on the general principles and provisions of House Bill number 4058.
Mr. Speaker.
There is a motion.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, what is the
For a
pleasure?
parliamentary inquiry.
What is the
Either.
pleasure of Congresswoman from ML,
Okay.
De Lima?
So we are now being made to understand that we're about to start the interpellations for the budget. Now, this morning, after the, or at the conclusion, or before the conclusion of the BARC meeting, the executive committee meeting of the Committee on Appropriations, where the Honorable Chair of the Committee on Appropriations presented to us the key features of the amendments done at the BARC level. Now, we were made to understand that copies of that presentation of the Honorable Chair of the Committee on Appropriations will be made available to us, the members of the plenary, in time for the start of the plenary deliberations. Also, do we have copy of the committee report itself? How can we start deliberations if these vital documents are not before us? So that's my point of order, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader, the point of order in question. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the majority and on the part of the sponsor, we are made to understand that the amendments done during the Budget Appropriations Committee amendments also included members of the minority, included members of the majority, who approved the amendments. And during our rules meeting, approving the inclusion of the committee report for plenary deliberations, members of both minority and majority approved the same. To address the point of order of the Honorable De Lima, it has been the parliamentary practice ever since that we get the chance to read the committee report during budget deliberations. We have 2 weeks to deliberate the budget and the committee report, and we respect the minority's position, but to allow us to commence deliberations of the budget, I hope that the Honorable De Lima will allow the budget proceedings to proceed, and copies of the committee report will be distributed accordingly during today's session.
Mr. Speaker, my
Representative De Lima?
reaction, please.
Please
Okay,
proceed.
yes, we confirm that most of the minority members, most of the members of the minority bloc were present at this morning's executive committee meeting of the Committee on Appropriations. But we were made to understand that copies of the presentation itself of the chair of the Committee on Appropriations will be made available to us. It's different that, you know, we actually discussed the presentation, but we did at this morning's executive committee meeting, we also did not have copy of that presentation. And we pointed that out, and they told us that it would be made available
to us. And then how can the distinguished senior majority leader say that the committee report has been made available to us during the budget committee hearings? How can there be a committee report when at that point the agency budgets were just being discussed? The committee report would come after that level and right before this plenary deliberations. So where is it? Where is the committee report? We cannot possibly participate in the deliberations without the committee report, without the presentation of on the Bar C amendments. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we apologize for the delay in the distribution of the committee report as well as the presentation, but in line with our rules allowing sending electronic copies of committee reports as well as presentations, we assure the Honorable De Lima that the same have been distributed electronically through Viber as authorized under our rules. May I request the Honorable De Lima if she can allow the sponsorship of the national budget, and we will ensure that all members of the minority will be allowed their time to scrutinize and ask questions to the sponsor to ensure transparency and ensure that the budget is in accordance with our national development program.
Representative De Lima.
I'm sorry, but I cannot buy that. How can we scrutinize the budget if we don't have copies, especially of the presentation this morning? We didn't have that when the presentation was being done by the chairperson of the APRO committee, and now we still do not have it. So how can we scrutinize it? It's our duty as a minority to thoroughly scrutinize all of this, and we don't have that.
Mr. Speaker, may I be allowed to request for a suspension so we can meet with the members of a minority before we proceed with our deliberation?
Point well taken. Session suspended.
Wala.
Session resumed. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, before the suspension of the session, I reiterate my earlier motion that we proceed with the interpellation on the general principles and provisions of House Bill number 4058.
Any objection? Volmika Swansing, the sponsor of said measure, is also recognized.
Madam Speaker, may I be recognized briefly?
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before we proceed to the period of interpellation on the general principles and the general provisions of the General Appropriations Bill, may I request that the Honorable Laila de Lima be recognized for a brief manifestation, considering we had a good compromise between the minority and the majority.
The Honorable Laila de Lima is recognized for her manifestation. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Based on the discussions during the break, and it's really been a serious discussion, so we came up with a consensus, and we concede to the request of the distinguished deputy, the senior deputy majority leader, that we can proceed with the interpellations on the general principles, after which let's suspend and resume tomorrow. Our only request is that, since up to this very moment, we don't have yet copy, not even the e-copy of the committee report, that we be given time tonight to go over it, and we can start all over again tomorrow with the agency deliberations. That's the consensus reached during the break. Thank you.
Session suspended.